In a lonely wasteland, Rick is launched several feet across the ground during a naughty fight. Seriously worried he might go to heaven, his mentors emerge from the smoke. Rather than administering first aid, they praise him for his significant improvement over the past 2 years of training, assuring him he should have no problem with the E-rank adventurer exams now. In this world, adventurers are typically young people due to the physical strain, but some adults, like Rick, never give up on their dreams. Rick, still determined, goes to the reception desk and asks for his exam ticket. The receptionist, while confirming his details, recognizes Rick. Excitedly, she reminds him that they used to know each other. At first, Rick doesn't recognize her, but then recalls they were co-workers 2 years ago. She was shocked when Rick resigned unexpectedly, and even more so when she heard he quit his job to become an adventurer. Suddenly, the guild's usual drunkard approaches the front desk and starts flirting with the receptionist. When she tries to decline due to her work, the drunkard becomes aggressive. Rick steps in, pulling the guy aside and lightly tapping his stomach with enough force to knock him out instantly. The receptionist apologizes for the inconvenience, but Rick says it's fine. After receiving his exam number, Rick heads outside where a maid named Renette greets him. She asks if he's done with his registration, and Rick confirms, thanking her for waiting. As he talks, he's caught staring at Renette's ample bosom. She calls him out. Inside, other adventurers are shocked at the handprint left on the drunkard's dense steel armor. 2 men enter, recognizing the drunkard as Domal, an A-rank adventurer wanted for 30 counts of assault. Meanwhile, Rick undergoes a physical exam, and the physician is surprised he's taking the test at 32 years old. The examinees are then led to a room where they place their hands on a crystal ball to measure their mana. The orb glows depending on mana levels, with the highest being a C. When it's Rick's turn, the orb barely lights up, earning him an F. The other candidates mock Rick for his low score, but as the examiner calls the next candidate, the orb shatters spontaneously. The next test measures the candidates' offensive abilities. They are instructed to strike a slime bag designed to absorb significant impacts. Rick remembers training with the slime bag once. His mentor had told him that to become an adventurer, he must be able to destroy a golden slime bag with his fists. Rick initially doubted this, since a golden slime bag is as hard as a dragon's fang. However, seeing his mentor effortlessly destroy one with a single punch, Rick became motivated to train until he could do the same. He hid this training, but back to the present, candidates began lining up to strike the bag with all their might. After the first candidate, the next in line was the second son of the Darrier family. Rumor had it, his magic was as strong as a C-rank adventurer's, despite being only 11 years old. The boy cast a hell flame spell, surprising everyone, including Rick. The spell was tiny, yet the judges were impressed by the output. Rick was shocked, since the fireballs his magic teacher threw were far deadlier. Naturally, Rick assumed the boy's fireball was just as powerful, but shrunken to avoid destroying the building. As the attack power exam continued, Rick's turn came. As he approached the slime bag, the examiner asked if he was really over 30 years old. Rick confirmed, and the examiner suggested he was too old for this kind of training. The examiner advised him to quit. Rick felt judged for his age and almost gave up, but he had worked too hard to reach this point. He had punched slime bags until his knuckles came and kept going. All that pain had to count for something. Determined, he wound up his punch, and when he struck the bag, it splattered everywhere and flew through the wall, leaving everyone, including Rick, shocked by its weakness. The young candidate was frustrated by Rick's success, as he had hoped to shine in this test. However, as the next test began, the boy was left speechless. Rick had just tanked a 4th nature spell with ease. The examiner complimented Rick on his skill in blocking attacks. Rick appreciated the praise, as he was doing his best. The instructor, thinking Rick wasn't giving his all, advised him to use higher-tier defensive magic. Rick informed him that he only knew first-order spells and truly was doing his best. The examiner can't believe Rick is only capable of using first-order spells, given his precise control over his mana. Rick assures him that there won't be any problems, since his first order spells should be more than enough to handle anything the examiner can throw at him. The examiner takes this as a personal insult and prepares to use a fifth order spell to show Rick that he shouldn't be taken lightly. As he casts the spell and unleashes a shock cyclone, a massive shockwave echoes through the kingdom, so loud that even a knight on the other side of town can hear it. A few minutes later, Sylvester arrives at the exam center to figure out what's going on. He is informed that an F-rank adventurer managed to completely destroy a slime bag with his bare hands and perfectly block a fifth nature spell using only basic defense magic. Sylvester thinks she must be joking, but she is dead serious. At this moment, Rick is busy taking the written part of the exam, looking confident in his knowledge. After the test, Rick takes a break with Ryanette, who asks him how it went. Rick confidently responds that he is sure he will get 100% on the written test, since he spent 14 years working as a receptionist for the guild and couldn't possibly fail. However, he still worries his overall scores might not be good enough to pass the exam. Ryanette assures Rick that he should be fine, considering all the training he did to prepare for this exam. But moments later, the kid from earlier comes up to Rick and screams at him for doing too well on the tests. Rick, confused, assumes Freed must be lost and offers to help him. Freed is upset because he wanted to show off his rubbish skills to everyone. Freed's sister arrives and, seeing her brother crying, immediately starts yelling at Rick. Rick asks if she is related to Freed, and she introduces herself as Angelica Dude. Freed quickly tells her that this 40-year-old man ruined his day. Rick, offended, corrects them, saying he is only 30, but Angelica and Freed keep calling him a 40-year-old man. Eventually, Angelica throws her glove at Rick to challenge him to a duel. But Rick, not realizing it's a challenge, picks up the glove to avoid it getting stained. Unfortunately, according to noble customs, picking up the glove is a declaration of intent to duel. Angelica, delighted, sets a venue for the fight, saying she will take great pleasure in dominating Rick for making her brother cry. In the Film Kingdom, duels allow the winner to set a penalty for the loser. Angelica declares that the loser will have to serve the winner for the rest of their life. She is a second-class royal knight, but Rick doesn't know how strong that is. Ryanette explains that a second-class knight would be around B rank. Rick starts freaking out because he knows B rank adventurers can take out huge monsters on their own. However, Ryanette doesn't think it's a big deal and asks Rick to hold back so he doesn't end up killing her. Rick can't imagine holding back against someone at B rank while he is still F rank, as he has no context for how strong he truly is. So Ryanette tells him to have faith in all the training he's undergone for the past 2 years. Suddenly, all the traumatic training moments flood into his mind, and he ends up throwing up. Rick curses Ryanette for making him relive such torture, but she reminds him that if he survived all that, he shouldn't have a problem handling Angelica. Rick realizes she's right and gets up to face Angelica without fear. He's still unsure how well his current level of strength will hold up against a second-class knight, but there's no use worrying about it now. Angelica, confident in her strength, promises to hold back so Rick doesn't die and begins charging up her attack. She uses Blink Step to dash past Rick, demonstrating her cute speed. She surprises Rick, but not for the reason she thinks. Angelica declares she will finish him off with her next attack and uses Blink Step again. However, to Rick, she's moving incredibly slow. The power scales must have been exaggerated if she earned the title of Light Speed Angelica, as she is slower than his normal running speed. Rick easily dodges her pathetic strike, leaving Angelica in disbelief since only first-class adventurers have managed to react to her speed. She rationalizes that Rick got lucky, but vows not to let it happen again. She uses Blink Step once more, but Rick still perceives her as slow. But just as he's preparing to dodge Angelica's attack, she trips on a rock and briefly unlocks the vertical blade attack. Rick can't predict any of the strikes and struggles to dodge. By the time Angelica finally stops, Rick no longer thinks he can call himself strong, as he was completely unprepared for that attack. However, neither was Angelica, as she didn't plan any of it. She tries to play it cool and tells Rick she's turned on because he managed to dodge her last attack. But that just means she has to go even faster to overwhelm him. She uses her special technique to move 3 times faster than normal, but even at this speed, she's still pretty slow to Rick. He chooses not to attack carelessly, uncertain of the tricks she might have up her sleeve, so he dodges instead. Angelica is left flabbergasted that Rick can still keep up with her. She can only use that technique 2 more times before running out of milk energy, so she gives it everything she has and goes for one last desperate attack. However, she trips once more, and when Rick tries to intercept her with a punch, he ends up blowing a nice wet hole in the ground. Angelica realizes that she would have died from a punch like that if it had connected, so she is terrified of Rick and questions who he really is. Rick just says he's a former receptionist turned adventurer. Eager to continue his fight with Angelica, he climbs out of the hole to face her again. However, Angelica immediately surrenders, not wanting to risk getting killed. Rick doesn't understand why she's giving up, but her surrender makes him the winner. As per the penalty Angelica set, she now has to serve him for the rest of her life. Angelica had forgotten about that penalty, so she does the only thing she can think of. She catwalks away. Rick doesn't really care about the bet, so he doesn't chase after her. With the exam results coming out soon, he needs to go back to check if he passed. Rick and Renette head back to the exam center, where they are told that the results will soon be announced through their exam tickets. If you pass, your ticket will glow blue, allowing you to move on to the second stage of the exams. Rick is really worried he might have failed the exam, so Renette tries to reassure him that he did well. Rick thinks Renette is nice for trying to make him feel better, and if he were 10 years younger, he would totally marry her. Just then, Rick's card begins to glow. He picks it up in anticipation and is elated to discover that he has successfully passed the first exam. He leaves the hall with Renette, but as he steps outside, a dreadful stench fills his nostrils. He looks over and sees a rich dude walking straight up to Renette. The man introduces himself as Raster Dire Mute, the eldest son of the Dire Mute family. Rick has already dealt with 2 Dire Mute family members, but this time, Raster isn't here for Rick. He's here to pursue Renette. Rick tries to introduce himself to Raster, but Raster ignores him, focusing on Renette. Raster tells her that he is deeply in love with her personality and wants Renette to become his second wife. This is where Rick draws the line. As he can't lose Renette to someone like Raster, he steps in front of Renette and says she is his girlfriend, so Raster has no right to pursue her anymore. Raster notices that Rick is holding an exam card, which means he must still be F rank. He finds it hilarious that someone as old as Rick is still at the lowest rank. Rick tries to defend himself by pointing out that Raster also seems too old to be taking the exam, but Raster laughs and tells Rick that he isn't here as an examinee. He already passed the test at 14 and is now an A-rank adventurer and an instructor for the second part of the exam. Raster turns back to Renette and asks her to join him for dinner. Renette shuts him down, saying the only man she'll go with is Rick, especially given the ungodly amount of perfume Raster sprayed on himself. Enraged, Raster swears that if he ends up in charge of Rick's exam, he will make sure Rick suffers, thinking that this will somehow make Renette love him instead. After Raster walks off, Rick prays that he doesn't have to deal with him during the exam. He then notices that Renette is still clinging to him, causing him to jump back in embarrassment. He apologizes to Renette for calling her his girlfriend so suddenly, but Renette says he doesn't need to be sorry. She says it made her happy since he did it to get rid of Raster. Meanwhile, Raster is stewing in rage because he lost Renette to a middle-aged man. Just then, his 2 siblings come running up to him. Frey complains about an old man messing with him during the exam, while Angelica complains that the same old man beat her in a duel and wanted to make her his servant, even though she was the one who made the bet. Their complaints make it sound like they did nothing wrong, enraging Raster further. When he learns that the culprit is Rick, he gets a wicked grin, seeing an excuse to get payback. A while later, the mock battles are about to begin, and Rick is really nervous. Renette asks him to hold back during the exam. Just then, Rick and Renette bump into a man named Lynx, who says he will be in charge of Rick's exam. Rick celebrates, relieved that he won't have to deal with Raster. Lynx mentions that he's surprised Rick wants to switch to adventuring at his age, but finds it inspiring. Lynx, who became an adventurer at 24 and is still a B rank after 20 years, is motivated by Rick's determination and is excited to test him in the upcoming mock battle, though he won't go easy on him. Around the corner, Raster is lurking with devious plans in mind. As Rick and Lynx part ways, Lynx walks down a dark stairwell, and Raster appears with a proposal that doubles as a threat. Meanwhile, Rick and Renette are waiting in the locker room, and Rick is in a much better mood, excited about having Lynx as his instructor. However, someone comes in to announce that Lynx has mysteriously fallen ill and won't be able to act as an instructor. In his place, Raster has been assigned to take over Rick's exam. Rick starts freaking out. Renette mentions that Raster must have pulled some strings to make this happen, and, being related to Angelica and Freed, likely holds a grudge against Rick. Other examinees talk about how terrible it is to have Raster as an instructor. Known for his enjoyment in beating up F-rank adventurers, Raster picks one each year to mess with, doing everything in his power to make them flop. Later, as Raster is outside tormenting a random examinee, he fires a barrage of ice blasts and knocks the guy out. Just as he starts insulting the examinee for being weak, his fun gets interrupted by a message from the elite guard. Meanwhile, Rick is pacing around inside, worried about his upcoming turn and how he will handle Raster. Renette doesn't understand Rick's anxiety since he only needs to beat Raster, but Rick thinks it's impossible because Raster is a respected A-rank adventurer while Rick is only F-rank. Rick believes he'll die if he faces Raster. Tig, Biddy Renette gets in front of Rick and asks if he's really that unconfident in his skills. Rick sincerely believes he's an inadequate adventurer because he switched to this job too late in life. However, Renette tells him not to let others' opinions shake his non-existent confidence. She believes in him. Rick thanks her for her kind, juicy words, feeling much more confident. Just then, a cloaked boy approaches Rick and offers free fortune-telling. Despite the suspicious offer, Rick decides to go along with it. However, just as Rick is about to sit down, Renette notices a magic circle on the chair and tries to warn him it's a trap. But she is too late, and Rick is teleported away instantly. The boy removes his cloak, revealing himself as Freed, who is pleased with himself for tricking Rick. However, he didn't plan for an escape as well, and Renette, severely pissed, blows a delicious hole through the wall and grabs him by the cute collar. She demands to know where Rick has been teleported to. Freed initially refuses to tell her, but after a non-consensual eyelash trim and the threat of eye poking, he confesses that his teleportation magic can only send someone 100 meters away at most. Meanwhile, Rick appears by the river behind the training center, confused about how he got there. Suddenly, the elite guard shows up and informs him they have orders to beat the love out of him. Realizing that Raster and the others must be behind this, Rick calls them shameless for trying to make him miss his exam. The leader corrects him, saying this is a coordinated jumping by the elite guard, who consist of B and A-rank adventurers. Rick feels utterly outmatched. As Rick contemplates what to do, he notices some people standing on a ledge nearby. To his surprise, it's the senior members of his party, and they scare him more than the elite guard. His party members jump down and ask why he's here, when he has an exam to get to. Fearing for the lives of the elite guard, Rick lies, saying they were just helping him get ready. Braun offers to join if they're training, but Rick, knowing how hellish training with Braun is, tries to warn the elite guard leader to leave before they get themselves eaten to death. The leader doesn't take him seriously and orders his team to end Braun. However, when one of them tries to slash Braun, the sword shatters to pieces. Braun, stone-faced, commends the guy for strengthening his body well, but is disappointed that he didn't strengthen his weapon enough. The guy gets angry and decides to use his fists, but Braun grabs his dirty, sticky hand and squishes it until it turns purple, then uses healing magic to restore it. The elite guard leader realizes he might have screwed up by attacking these powerful people. As this unfolds, Mazette asks Rick if the elite guard is really here to pick a fight. Rick confirms. so Mazet offers to handle it peacefully. He then pulls out a Super Fire Barrel MK3 rifle and fires at everyone within range, leaving them limp on the ground. Rick yells at him for not being peaceful, but Mazet insists none of them are finished. One guard tries to take Alice as a hostage, unaware of how badly he's messed up. Even Braun tells him to back the F up if he doesn't want to die. The guy gives it to Alice to shut her up, sealing his fate as she easily deletes him. The other guards can't believe it, but the leader realizes the truth. Alice is a prodigy, the world's strongest mage at only 10 years old. Mazet is a dwarf with unparalleled technological skills, and Braun is an orc with incredible strength and wisdom. All of them are S-rank adventurers in a party known as Chaloom Fist. The leader decides to retire immediately, but the others who don't quit have to deal with Alice. Rick tries to ignore the baby criers and focus on his exam. Rick makes it back to Renette after she's dealt with Freed, and they soon find Lynx, who has been badly beaten. Earlier, Raster cornered Lynx and asked about his dream. When Lynx said he wanted to build a school for the kids in his village, Raster dismissed it and beat him up to get to Rick. This infuriates Rick, who now has nothing but determination to beat Raster. This concludes episode 2. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to not miss the next part.